If you're not familiar with the granular agronomy, we provide helpful management recommendations to our growers in hopes of challenging them to think differently about all aspects of increasing yield and productivity on their farm with the highest level of confidence possible. For over 50 years, we've been focused working with our growers in all aspects of agronomy, from soils to product knowledge, weed management, and fertility. In the last half decade, we've really been focused on getting dialed in on this ever-changing element of nitrogen management and how to get as precise as possible. Whether we're thinking about a farm operation where we've got a 50-mile radius from the north to the south, and how we can manage each one of those fields differently given the geographies. Or maybe we're ready to be in a position where we want to look sub-field and start to put in plans for managing some of that variability that we're experiencing in any given one of our fields. As we set out with this aspiration to increase the confidence in how we manage nitrogen, one of the first things that we knew we had to get right and was absolutely fundamental is better soils. As we look at having a good baseline for nitrogen management, having a good yield goal associated to each field, as well as that subfield yield variability, was absolutely critical. If we look at granular agronomy on a field like this, historically, we've managed this field the exact same way. We plant the same seeding rates across the entire field, north to south. We've managed it with pre-plant emergent herbicide, as well as pre-plant 32% for that nitrogen rate. And now what we're looking to do is be able to provide a little bit better visibility of where we can increase nitrogen management within this field. Historically, this field is averaged in that 220 range, so we've got that set as a yield goal. And what we've done to build the baseline here is use all of the data at our fingertips to get as accurate as possible. So on this farm, we really like the way that our sorghum soils look. And what's interesting about this field is we can start to pick apart a field like this on the north half where we look at those Ridgeport sandy loams, we're looking at organic matter content of about 1%. Very high sand content, upwards of nearly 70%. And we compare and contrast that in the north half versus the south half, where we take a look at a soil type like a Webster silty clay loam. And what we're seeing there is upwards of 4% organic matter, 4 times the amount on the north half, 33% clay content, 40% silt, much different in terms of variability. So what we want to be able to do is utilize not only our sorghum soils, but we also want to be able to utilize our historical yield data that's at our disposal. You know, how many years have we collected yield data and we've said or made the comment that, hey, we're not actually using it for management decisions. Now that's going to change. On this field, we've got all the way back to 2017 for historical data. So on this field, I can look at the variability that we've come to see within this field. And what's interesting to note is as we look at those soil types coupled with the yield map, we're seeing some pretty close similarities, whether it be 2017 looking at when we had corn on that field, to even looking ahead at this last year where we had soybeans. We're seeing that exact same variability any given one of those years. So we want to make sure that we're able to take advantage of having that yield data. By having that focus on better soils, what we've accomplished is taking together both of those layers and building that as our management zone as the foundation for nitrogen management. From there, it's super important that we get as accurate as possible when we look at bringing into account what are the key elements of management on this farm. And what we mean by that is what type of products are we placing on the farm? Are we placing a 100-day relative maturity, or are we placing a 113-day relative maturity? Because that makes a big difference when we think about nitrogen management as well as crop uptake, pre-tassel as well as even in grain fill. What type of seeding rate are we putting on that farm? Are we going pre-plant nitrogen or side dress? Do we have fall anhydrous? All of those factors being able to plug in our plan A is what is the first step in giving us an understanding of, are we going to be long or short as we look at the predictions for the crop modeling? On this field, as we look at having 210 pounds down up front, which is our normal plan, right now on the first part of June, we're projecting that we're going to be about 22 pounds short on this field. And that's as a whole. And so as we look at this field, what we're able to do is start modeling out all aspects of what's going on within these soils and crop growth and development. Looking at the bottom portion here, we have the ability to simulate nitrogen levels within this field on every single day from here moving forward. In addition to having that capability of having soil information, better weather was something that we decided was extremely important. And so we're taking into account field by field weather on every single one of our fields within nitrogen modeling. On this field, what's really intriguing is as we look at the individual field nitrogen performance, right now we're projecting that on that north half of the field, we're going to be a little bit short when it comes up to tasseling, when we need about 40% of our nitrogen to sustain us and meet us our yield goals from there through maturity. On this field as a whole, we can look at every single aspect of nitrogen and where it's coming from, so mineralization, to where we're losing it, such as leaching. And where we've had some really big ahas on a field like this is if we dive into that Ridgeport sandy loam, what's intriguing to me is when we look at that soil type specifically, we're leaching by the end of the season upwards of 125 pounds per acre. And so what that's telling me is when we're going 210 pounds up front, we're not able to sustain and hold all of that throughout the entire growing season. What's also interesting about this area of the field is looking at mineralization. We know that organic matter is extremely important in how that provides mineralization, which is ultimately nitrogen through biological activity through that field. We're looking at about nearly 80 pounds, which is okay given the circumstances of that soil type. Now we compare that to the south half of the field, and what's interesting is when we look at leaching, we're down about 40 pounds is potentially going to be lost. And you compare that, nearly 100 pounds difference in that north half versus the south half. So what does that tell us as we evaluate options for in-season management such as side dress? We've got a great capability on those heavier clay soils to supply that crop with the nitrogen it's needed, not only from a mineralization standpoint, which we look like we're going to be supplying upwards of 140 pounds per acre, but also on the back end where we're not losing as much as well too. So great visibility as we look at our yield target and being able to achieve that with our current nitrogen plan. So as we look at this field right now, that north half of the field looks like it's going to be one where we want to think about managing that in season. So as we evaluate that, one of the first questions that we need to ask ourselves is, if that's the case, what are we going to do about it? On this field, what we want to look at doing is putting a plan together for an in-season nitrogen application to really make sure that we're sustaining the nitrogen levels that we need to on that north half of the field. So here what we're going to do today is we're going to put in a plan where in about 2 weeks from now, the mid part of June, we want to create a variable rate recommendation for that field. On this specific field, we will be using 32% as that product. And what we're going to be looking at is using our decision zone, which is that baseline for the most accurate soils as possible to create that recommendation from. In this field, we're going to do a shallow injection because we're going to use a coulter rig to side dress that. And in this example, we decided that we're not going to go with an inhibitor since we're going to be using that in season. Now, once we generate that prescription, we'll now be able to look at increasing the probability of success across that entire field and starting to eliminate some of that variability. Once that nitrogen prescription is run, given all of the factors input into the model from variable rate to product to soils, yield goals, weathers over 20 years, what we have is a prescription with an average of about 30 pounds per acre, and that's the field average. As we dive specifically into that field, what you can see is we're starting to focus on managing that variability with that variable rate prescription. On the north half of the field, on those Ridgeport soils where we had higher potential for leaching, we're looking at a recommended rate of about 50 pounds per acre. And we compare that to the south half of the field on those Webster soils, we're looking at just nearly 10 pounds per acre needed. We have the capability to add in those minimums and maximums to really fit that grower preference. But what we have now is a great prescription that helps us meet and achieve those goals that we had set forth. After running that simulation, we can now see that we're within about 9 pounds on the upside of what that goal needed to be given that 220 bushel target at the beginning of the season. You can see now we're looking at really mitigating some of that risk, and we've got so much more consistency across this field looking at nitrogen levels, by tassel, which is ultimately what we need to be able to sustain. We're looking at goals of about 95 pounds per acre in the soil at that point in time, and we'll be sitting at about 105 pounds per acre. So putting us in a great position as we look at achieving those yield goals and that managing that variability on a given field like this. Nitrogen management will continue to be one of those ever-evolving areas that we look to manage by bringing in better soils, better weather, better product insight. We're ultimately focused on bringing all that together with our certified service agencies to help bring a high level of confidence in all aspects of our growers' desired nitrogen management goals and helping them achieve those plans.